Sounds good. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for Taste of Art this evening with Lehigh University Art Galleries. My name is Elise Schaefer. I'm the coordinator of Museum Experience and Accessibility at LUAG, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our program this evening and to introduce our presenters, Catherine O'Hare and Maite Gomez-Rejon. Catherine is a senior at Lehigh University studying marketing and graphic design, and has also worked with us as a social media and marketing intern for LUAG, as well as a museum education intern and work study student. So she's been with us for a few years. Maite Gomez-Rejon, founder of ArtBites. For over a decade, Maite has been exploring the nexus of art and culinary history through lectures, cooking classes, and tastings presented at museums and cultural centers across the country. She's also just launched an exciting new podcast with Eva Longoria called Hungry for History, which can be found wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Together, Maite and Eva examine the origins of yummy entrees, ingredients, and drinks through their Mexican heritage. And I have to highly recommend it because I really like it and I listen to it a lot. We are so excited to have both of these presenters here with us tonight to explore the art and significance of the Mexican recipe of mole and the incredible artwork and legacy of artist Frida Kahlo. Taste of Art is a free public program that combines mini art history lessons with live cooking demonstrations. The program spotlights local Southside restaurants to celebrate and build awareness of the community's eclectic, historic, and diverse urban culture. Each Taste of Art workshop pairs a work of art from Lehigh's art collection with a related recipe from the featured restaurant or artist to highlight the diverse cultures and voices that make up Bethlehem Southside's community. This program has been brought to you through the Institute of Museum and Library Services American Rescue Plan. And if you haven't picked up a kit yet, there are a limited number of free kits left at LUAG's main gallery and Zollner Art Center. We post the recording online afterwards, so it's not too late to pick up a kit. You can watch tomorrow if you like, rewatch tomorrow if you like, and make the kit then. We're open this week 11 to 7 Thursday, 11 to 5 Friday, and 1 to 5 on Saturday. If you want us to put a kit aside for you, you can email us at luag@lehigh.edu. Another fun thing we're doing with Taste of Art is that as part of the program, participants are eligible to win gift certificates to local Southside restaurants. So if you make this recipe or you really like the Zoom, please make sure you tag us and follow us on social media after your participation when you try out the recipes. The winner from today's program will receive a gift card to La Lupita on 3rd Street in Bethlehem. And before I turn it over to Catherine, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about Lehigh University Art Galleries. If you haven't heard of us before, we're located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania on Lehigh University's campus. We're a free museum with, by the end of this year, I think it'll be almost 19,000 works of art from all over the world, diverse time periods and cultures. This is just a few selections from our permanent collection. We manage 7 gallery spaces on 3 of Lehigh's campuses, 2 art study centers, a LUAG reading room, which is a great reference library for art history and museum studies and everything in between. And we also have a collection of 56 outdoor sculptures. So it's my pleasure now to turn the mic over to Catherine to tell a little bit about our artists for today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine. I'm a senior here at Lehigh. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the pieces we have in our collection at the galleries that relate to Frida. So this first one is actually a photograph taken by Frida's father, Guillermo. So Guillermo was born in present-day Germany. His name was originally Carl Wilhelm, but later in life, he had moved to Mexico and adopted the Spanish equivalent of his name. Excuse me. So he became a very well-known German-Mexican photographer. He was known for photographing architectural works, mostly churches, landmarks, and streets, as well as some industries and companies in Mexico. Because of this, his work has been considered having artistic, historical, and documental importance. He's also credited with giving Frida her first camera and served as an inspiration for her art. This is a photograph of Frida in bed by Hector Garcia Cobo. Hector Garcia Cobo was a Mexican photographer and photojournalist. He's very well known in Mexico. He has said that people tended to call him an artist because of the aesthetic appeal of his photographs, but he always preferred to be known as a photojournalist due to the political and cultural significance of his subject matter. If we see in the next slide, this is another photo from the same series by Kobo. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Frida's background as well. I know most of us have heard of her, but she was a Mexican painter known for her many portraits, especially her self-portraits. Her style was considered more of a Mexican folk art type of style, but she's also been called a surrealist or magical realist due to the elements of mixed realism and fantasy that she incorporates in her pieces. She's also known for painting about her experience with chronic pain. She had polio as a child, and she was also in a bus accident as a teen that caused her lifelong pain and medical problems. But it was during that time that she rediscovered art and a career as an artist while she was recovering. Since then, she's become an icon in the feminist movement and the Latino community, as well as queer communities. This next photograph we have is actually currently on display in our teaching gallery. That's the downstairs gallery. A bit earlier in this semester, I did a little tour. It talks a little bit about this. This painting's, there's a, excuse me, there's a painting featured in this photograph, one of Frida's painting called The Love Embrace. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that actually. We get a closer look in the next slides. So this painting has a lot of layers of entwining embraces. It features this figure of like a feminine universe in the background, a dark and a light side, and the universe is holding Frida, and Frida looks like she's holding a child, but it's actually a depiction of her husband. A lot of people talk about the themes of womanhood and motherhood and the perception of her husband in this piece. I think that the most interesting thing to me was how she depicted her husband in like infantilized version almost, because she's known for having quite a tumultuous relationship with her husband. However, she's also been quoted as calling him a brilliant man and a talented artist. But a lot of people say that this painting depicts her more as a maternal figure over him, as if he needed to be babied or pampered. So that was what I considered most interesting. I don't know if we can open this up to hear comments. Can we do that?
Absolutely. If anyone has any questions or comments, you are welcome to unmute yourself, or you can add your comments in the chat.
I just want to say that red planet that is in the picture looks a lot like Mars. It really does look like Mars.
I noticed that behind the figure you described as the universe, it's like there's another mask-like figure in the clouds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a two-faced figure there.
I think one of my favorite things about her work is how she incorporates like a lot of natural plant life. And I know we're going to get into this, but like food and everyday items that are really recognizable, that are kind of like a nod to her cultural background. So I always really like when I see like cacti and succulents in her work, because it makes me think of like Mexico. It's really beautiful.
All right, if there are no other comments, I'm going to pass it off to Maite.
Thanks, Catherine. Sorry, I couldn't find the button to unmute myself. That was amazing, and thank everybody for being here today. I'm so fascinated by Frida's life, and those photographs are so stunning. I've never seen them before, and oftentimes, you know, we see a lot of Frida's work and we see a lot of the same work over and over, but it's so fascinating to see something that's completely new. I wish I was there to see them in person. But like you said, Catherine, and Elise as well, just the way that, that last painting, that she incorporates native ingredients. She has the cactus in there. And another thing, Catherine, when you mentioned that her father was German, her father is German. Her mother, Frida's mother, was his second wife, and she was part Spanish, part Indigenous. So we have the German, the Spanish, the Indigenous. Really shows the complexity of Mexico, and of course of Mexican cuisine. And I want to talk a little bit more about her life as I'm cooking, because I want to see everybody in their kitchens. But I wanted to, end this part of the class with this painting, which is one of my favorite paintings of Frida. It's quite small. It's painted in 1954, the year of her death. She was born in 1907. So she was born in 1907, which is when the Mexican Revolution was just brewing, was just sort of these ideas of revolution was beginning to bubble. Mexico had been recently independent from Spain, but there was a lot of turmoil, of course. The revolution began in 1910, so she fudged the year of her birth a little bit by 3 years. She said she was born in 1910, the year of the revolution. She was born she was basically part of the bloody rebirth of Mexico. She had a very tumultuous life, like we heard from Catherine. This was her last painting. It's a painting of watermelon. Watermelon is actually native to Africa, made its way into Mexico in the 16th century with enslaved Africans who were brought over to work on sugar plantations. But it's a plant, it's a fruit that we see in every streetcar. There's one on the corner of where I live here in Los Angeles selling, fruit. And the last words of this painting, it says, "Viva la vida," which translated into English basically means "yay, life." She had polio as a child. She was in a horrible streetcar accident when she was a schoolgirl, which left her in pain her entire life. Yet her last words were, "Yay, life." So she painted this when she was bedridden. So it's a very, very small painting. So from this food, I wanted to just show her cookbook. So if we could just look at the last image, and then we'll remove we'll get out of the PowerPoint presentation. But this is a book, Frida's Fiestas. If any of you are familiar with it, great. If not, it's a really wonderful book. It's very easily found. And Frida's Fiestas, it's actually a book. It's called Recipes and Reminiscence of Life with Frida Kahlo. And it was actually written by Guadalupe Rivera, which was Diego Rivera's daughter by his first wife, Lupe Marin, who was beautiful, also artist. They hated each other and they loved each other. At one point, they lived in the same house. So again, a very tumultuous life, but Lupe Marin taught Frida how to cook. So they married. When she married Diego, he was much older, 20 years her senior. He was 42 years old, 6'1", 300 pounds. She was 22 years old, 5'3", and 98 pounds. So he 300 pounds and 98 pounds. And she called him she never had children. She called him her baby. So that painting that we just saw from Catherine is very significant. She was his baby. And even though they adored each other, they hated each other, they divorced, they remarried, they lived together, they lived in separate houses, connected by a bridge. They definitely had a very colorful life together. But this book is written by his daughter, and it's basically about just memories of her life with Frida. She, again, learned to cook from Lupe Marin, but she had her mother's cookbook, which is a very significant Mexican cookbook. It's called The Mexican Cook, the first cookbook that was published in Mexico that dates to 1831. So which is quite interesting given the fact that Mexico has such a long history. The first printed cookbook did not appear until the early 19th century. She had her mother's copy of this book. That it's mentioned, they write about, oh, actually, I just opened it up to that page. It's actually this cookbook, The Mexican Cook. The version that she had was called The New Mexican Cook. So it's, subsequent editions were called The New Mexican Cook. And I actually have a copy of it. This is the 1909 version of the cookbook. It's the last printed edition. So this is quite significant. This is a very interesting book. The early version of this, it appeared right after the independence from Spain, yet the earliest version reads like a European cookbook. It's mostly, you don't see tortillas. The tortilla recipe that we see is the Spanish potato and egg tortilla. So it's a very European cookbook. And it was also published in Paris. This particular version that I have was printed in Paris. So it's actually very interesting. But you do have a lot of, and it's falling apart, you do have a lot of recipes for mole. Which is what we're making today, and which is what she served at her wedding. But before I start actually making it, I just want to say a few more things about her and about food and about her fascination with food. So she said that she was born in 1910, the beginning of the revolution, which lasted 10 years. So there was a movement among artists of that period. Frida, of course, her husband, Siqueiros, Orozco. There was a huge, movement, men, women, the Mexican muralist movement was all happening during this time, and they were supported by the government. The Ministry of Education at the time was a man named Jose Vasconcelos, and he was very supportive of the arts, and he commissioned all of these artists to go out there and basically, paint murals in public buildings, in government buildings, basically, everywhere. And it was very political. Of course, all of their art was very political. Frida's art was political in her own way. She spent so much time alone, and she painted what she knew, which was herself. But if you look at it, you see these images of herself and her life and her mixed, race, which is quite significant, which is showing the complexity of class and race in Mexico, at the time, in addition to her own personal, struggles and all of this. It was a quite interesting movement referred to as indigenismo, which is sort of the people were looking at Mexico itself for their roots, for their identity, as opposed to looking at the Spanish conquistadors, as opposed to looking to Spain, and as opposed to looking to France. Prior, just around this time, which is when the revolutionary ideas were brewing, the president was a man named Porfirio Diaz, and he was a Francophile. He was from Oaxaca, he was indigenous, but he loved everything French. He opened up the country to outside influences, and Frida and her group of people were very much against this, although she also kind of loved this. She loved going to the French style bakeries in Mexico, and all of the snooty Mexicans would sort of, look down on her because she would dress as a Tehuana, and all of these images, she's dressed in her Mexican garb. And she has this wonderful quote. Sorry, let me see if I can find it. So she would go to these French, style bakeries. There was one, the oldest one in Mexico. It's called La Flor de Mexico, the flower of Mexico, filled with the Mexican elite. And when she would go with Lupe, with Guadalupe, who wrote this book, of course, little Guadalupe was mortified that people were looking at them the way that they were. And she would say to them, the only thing you could do with people like this is tell them to go to hell. But yet she still enjoyed. So she loved having a little bit of whiskey or a little bit of brandy, but as soon as Diego got home, she switched to tequila. He was very much against utensils. He thought it was for the bourgeoisie, only tortillas, only eating with tortillas. So she was sort of in the middle of all of this. She loved, of course, native ingredients, but she really enjoyed everything. She truly, her last words in her art were "Viva la vida," and she truly enjoyed life to the fullest. And everything you read about her, you know, her paintings are so dark and so, you know, so much suffering, but she loved to tell jokes. She had a loud laugh. She just, you know, she loved to throw a party. She loved to cook, and she loved to entertain. So this was what she most, you know, loved to do. And food was another art form to her as well. Creating these experiences were as important as creating, you know, art. And she was actually, what I found so interesting, there's so many interesting things about her, and I know I need to start cooking, but she was the first Mexican artist, 20th century Mexican artist, to be collected by the Louvre Museum in Paris. She showed her work in New York. She was quite accomplished and when she was living as well. It wasn't one of these artists that were discovered, you know, after her death. I think there is more of this allure of her now, but she was definitely very accomplished during her life as well. But the book is divided into 12 chapters, each a chapter for each month of the year, and it starts in August, which is the year that the month that she married Diego the first time. I don't know what month she married him the second time, but it's the first time. So it starts, and it's all very wonderful, you know, dishes, traditional dishes, a lot of beautiful photographs of the houses, the famous blue house where they live. She actually lived here as a child. So there are a lot of images of them at home, of paintings, of flower sellers that she would, you know, buy flowers from. She was very much about, she loved animals, she loved flowers, she loved food, she loved cooking. August 26th was her wedding day. She had oyster soup, which is very European, so you could see this sort of mix. White rice with plantains, huauzontlés and green sauce. It's a plant that has tiny little leaves. You can sometimes get it in Los Angeles at the Mexican markets during the summer. Stuffed chiles with cheese, stuffed chiles with meat, and then black mole, which we're making today. Actually, we're making a simplified version of black. So here's the black mole. Before we start making the mole, mole is interesting. The word mole literally it comes from the Nahuatl, which is the Aztec language, muli, which means sauce. So mole basically just means sauce. Oaxaca and southern Mexico, they claim to have, 7 moles. It's the land of the 7 moles, but really there are millions of variations of mole. It's something that's typically served in traditional weddings in Mexico, or baptisms, someplace where you have to feed a lot of people. It's very labor intensive. It takes a lot of time. We're making a very simplified mole inspired by her mole recipe. It's typically served with chicken. We're making enmoladas, which is like, if you think of enchiladas, which means in Chile, the tortilla in Chile, we're passing the tortilla in the mole. So I'm going to start making it. I'm going to move these books out of the way and continue talking about Frida. Oh, I forgot to make a margarita. Let's make the margarita. How many people are cooking along with me today? Is anybody cooking along? Let's see. Ashley, I see little hands. A few of you. Christine, okay, excellent. So a few of you are cooking along. Great. So I'm just going to start off with the margarita. And actually, let me go get some rice. I'm gonna be right here. Okay. Actually, before I make it, I'm going to get started. So I'm just trying to be mindful of time. Before I make the margarita, I'm going to start prepping some of the things for the mole. So the typical moles have like 20 some recipes, 25 recipes, about when was it? It was probably in the early 2000s. I spent a month in Oaxaca. I wanted to learn the 7 moles. And I was basically they taught me when I went to somebody's house to learn the black mole. It was, 25 ingredients. They were burning the chiles. They were burning everything. I was coughing. People were laughing at me. So again, I'm making a very simplified version. Let's see. Okay, so I just put this on here just to, if I need to show images. But they always have chiles and tomato and onion. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just heating up this pan. And before I make the margarita, because this is going to take a little while, I'm just heating up. It's a dry skillet. There's nothing on it, no oil, no anything on it. And as soon as that heats up, I'm going to put 3 tomatoes, 3 just Roma tomato. They're super ripe tomatoes. Just going to let that heat up. I'm actually just going to put them, just a dry skillet. I'm going to do the 3 tomatoes. I'm going to, oh, I forgot my knife. 3 tomatoes, 2 cloves of garlic. Just gonna put them on there just to brown, to get a little bit of, just to get a little flavor. Again, I have a dry skillet. And does anybody have any questions while I do this about Frida? There's so much to say about Frida, and I will, continue to share stories. But does anybody have? I'm just peeling the garlic right here. And I'm just throwing it in there. Where's everybody joining us from?
Well, I'm joining you in Pennsylvania. And also I have a question.
Yes.
Are we right now about with the tomatoes and the garlic? Are we making the chocolate or the drink?
We're making the chocolate right now. We're making the mole, which has chocolate in it. Yeah, I'm just gonna start that first, and then I'm gonna make the drink. Well, what I'm doing now is I have the 3 tomatoes. And let me just move this out of the way so that you could see. I have 3 tomatoes, 2 cloves of garlic, and half an onion. And I'm just going to put, yay, Pennsylvania, LA, lots of Pennsylvania. And I'm just going to put just the garlic, I'm sorry, the 2 cloves of garlic and half of a onion, just half of an onion, just like this. I'm just going to put it on there. Oh. Just to get a little bit of color.
Half of an onion.
Yeah, half an onion. Let me flip this over just so you can see. It's very, very simple. Half an onion. Just half an onion, 3 tomatoes. I cut the top off because it was getting a little old. So I just have the 3, and that's it. I'm just going to leave them on there. You could see that it's a dry skillet. I'm just going to leave them there so that I could get a little bit of color. So I can already smell it. I can already start smelling the onion. So that's just going to be there for a little while. And then we're going to rehydrate our chiles. So I have a bowl here with 2 guajillo chiles, which is this long chile, and 2 ancho chiles. Yeah, the garlic shouldn't burn. And if it does burn, just set it out. If it starts burning, we're just going to get a little bit of color on it. It's okay if it gets a little brown. So I have the 2 guajillo chiles and 2 ancho chiles. Ancho chiles is the poblano chile that you use to stuff peppers. It's the dried version of that. If you can't find the ancho, you could use pasilla. Sometimes it's easier to find. They're very similar flavor profile. Pasilla is just a little more spicy, but it's not like spicy. It just has a little more kick to it. you could use either one. So I already peeled and, sorry, not peeled, but just removed the top and de-seeded them. So I have some hot water over here. I'm just gonna pour some hot water onto the chiles just to rehydrate. And for those of you that are cooking along, I'm sorry if this is a little bit confusing, but so I'm just hot water pouring them over the chiles to rehydrate them. The chiles, I have 4, 2 ancho, 2 pasilla. I'm sorry, 2 ancho, 2 guajillo. And they're just in this bowl, and I'm just gonna set them aside to rehydrate while the tomatoes and the onion and the garlic get a little color. And let's see, I'm just gonna move these around. Takes a little bit of time. And now I can make my margarita, but I'm gonna get another knife that doesn't have onion. Okay. So, like I said, she taught at a school called La Esmeralda. It was an art school in Mexico City that she taught at. And she always treated everybody equally. She treated her students like her colleagues. She treated her housekeepers like her family. She treated everybody exactly the same. So she always encouraged her students to drink pulque, which is a drink, a fermented drink that's native to Mexico. It's made from the fermented agave. So similar to the tequila is made from the distilled agave, the blue agave. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start putting all of these goodies in my shaker. I have I'm going to rim my glass. I have some salt here, and I'm going to just take some lime and rim the edges of my glass with the lime juice and dip it in just to get a little bit of flavor. I'm using this jalapeno lime salt that I love. So a nice little rim there. And this is starting to get some really nice color. I'll show you in a minute after the drink. And then in here, I'm going to add 2 ounces of tequila. Of course, we had to have tequilas. It's the drink. It was the drink that Diego liked. She liked it too, even though she really liked whiskey and brandy. But this is what, you know, the real Mexicans drink, whatever that means. So I have 2 ounces of tequila. I'm going to do 1/2 ounce of orange liqueur. I'm using a triple sec. And then about 1 ounce of lime juice. I'm just going to do typically the juice of 1 lime. And 1/4 ounce of simple syrup. You can use agave if you like agave. If you're making the mocktail version, just skip the alcohol. I would add maybe a little bit more sugar and a little bit more lime and add some sparkling water, and you just have a really lovely limeade. So I'm just going to set this aside and add to my glass. And some ice to my cocktail shaker. And then shake, shake, shake. And then just I'm going to strain it into my glass. It's nice, and I'm going to put it close to the camera so you can see. It's nice and frothy with the shaking. And I think Frida would be proud. Cheers, everybody. I love a good margarita. This is a good one. So good. Delicious. Makes me happy. Okay. So the history of the margaritas, we don't really know. There are lots of theories about where the margarita came from, but the most plausible theory is there was a very popular cocktail, 19th century American cocktail called the Daisy. There's a bartender's manual written by this man named Jerry Thomas. It's called How to Mix Drinks, the Bartender's Guide. It's the very first cocktail manual. And there was a recipe called the Daisy, which basically had the same ingredients as the margarita, but with gin. And legend has it that in the 1920s, someone went to Tijuana, asked for a Daisy. The bartender grabbed a bottle of tequila instead of a bottle of gin and called it a margarita. Daisy is margarita is the name of the flower. It's the same thing. That's the legend. There are lots of legends. That's the most plausible legend. So it sort of dates to this time of the 1920s, this revolutionary time. I'm going to flip my camera over so that you can see what this looks like, and it smells really good. Whoops. Smells really good. So there's have some color. The onion looks really good. I'm just going to flip it over. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. You see how this is starting to get really nice and squishy? That's what I'm looking for. The garlic is nice and stark. That's what I want. Okay, I'm going to take the garlic out and I'm going to put it in my blender. I'm going to let this go a little longer. So in the meantime, I have let me move this from the heat. Just going to flip this over. So in my blender, I just have the 2 cloves of garlic, but I'm going to add some nuts to it. So often the things that we always have in mole: tomatoes, chile, always, onion, garlic, nuts. So either peanuts, almonds, it can be any sort of variation of nuts. I'm doing one with peanuts. So I have half a cup of toasted peanuts. So I'm going to put half a cup of peanuts in here and 2 tablespoons of toasted sesame seeds. This recipe is so interesting. It's just so complex. It really, if you deconstruct this recipe, we're going all over the world. The peanuts are from Brazil, sesame seeds are from Africa, tomatoes are from, Mexico. Onion and garlic are old world. It's basically a trip around the world in this dish. And people say there's nothing more Mexican than mole. It's absolutely true because it's just a mix of everything. The traditional mole, pre-colonial mole, very likely did not have chocolate, even though chocolate is native. Chocolate was very expensive. It was just it was only consumed as a drink by aristocracy, by priests. It was actually cocoa seeds were used as currency. So it's very unlikely that they would have been cooking with it. It was just more than likely just a beverage. So I have my nuts here, my garlic, and I'm going to put, I see my tomatoes are getting nice and squishy. Let me show you. I'm going to put them in there as well. You see how nice and squishy? I'm going to put those in there. And I'm not going to bother peeling the skin or anything. Onion is really nice as well. I'm just going to cut this end off. Just flip this over. Just going to cut this off. And it smells amazing. Okay, and I'm just going to put the onion in the blender. And I'm going to see what my chiles look like. You saw that they were really hard before. They've only been here for a minute, but look, they're nice and soft already. They're nice and rehydrated. So this is what we want. It didn't take very long at all. The fresher your dried chiles are, the less time it's going to take. So I'm going to put the dried chiles in the blender. with everything else. And then, okay. So I'm going to set that aside. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. And in the same pan, I'm going to cook some plantains. So right now, basically I have sesame seeds, everything. Sesame seeds, peanuts, tomatoes, onions, chiles, and garlic. We have a few more ingredients. We have plantain, super ripe plantain that I'm going to fry on both sides. So I'm actually going to use this thing skillet. I'm going to heat up some oil. I have just regular vegetable oil. I'm actually using grapeseed oil. So I'm just going to heat some oil. Super hot. I'm going to lower my temperature to medium because it's so hot. And then I'm going to slice my plantain. Plantain is also native to Africa. It's one of the, we see it a lot in Caribbean cooking. It's a banana that's different than your regular cereal morning banana. It could be used at any level of ripeness. This is the super ripe, the black one. It's super ripe. So I'm just going to slice it and peel it, and I'm just going to fry it until it's nice and golden brown. This is going to give everything a really nice sweetness and balance the chiles, the smokiness of the chiles, because these chiles that we're using, they're since they're dry, they're much more smoky than they are spicy. Does anybody have any questions as I go? Any questions about Frida, about, you know, for me, for Catherine, for Stacy, for anybody? Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm just going to put this in my hot oil and then just fry for a couple of minutes on each side. Just to get a little bit of color. This is my favorite thing to eat in the world, fried plantains. So just about a minute or so per side.
Maite, when you were growing up, did you often eat mole at home?
Yes, I did, but we never, my mom was here today.
She is here.
She's here today. Yeah, we would make mole. She would make mole all the time. She never made it from scratch. She would just buy it at the store. But we would have mole all the time. It was basically the black mole that she would make. I don't know, I'm not getting a good angle on there. That's better. Just the black or the red mole, typically the black mole, which is the one that has the chocolate, and then serve it with chicken and then a side of rice and plantains. It was, you know, often we would have this. I grew up in Laredo, Texas, on the border of Mexico. So we would go to Nuevo Laredo, which is, you know, just across the border. And there were grocery stores, and you could actually buy. They had these like mounds of mole, so you would buy it by the pound. So I did grow up eating it, and it's one of my favorite dishes. You know, so much so that I, you know, went to Oaxaca on a mission to learn how to make it because my mom never really made it. It's too laborious, really, to, you know, to make from scratch. This recipe it's simplified, but I did. Does anybody else grow up eating mole? I wonder. Okay. All right, so that looks pretty good to me. Nice and have some nice color. So I'm going to add this to my blender. So I have one plantain. Again, this is going to give everything like a really nice sweetness, but not like cloyingly sweet. You do want like a nice ripe plantain. So we have all of the ingredients. The only other thing that I'm going to add right now is some oregano. So I have some Mexican oregano, which is very different than the Italian oregano. It's much more like, you know, anisey. So I'm just going to add 1 tablespoon. Ashley, I just see your questions. How did they make it before blenders? That's a very good question. They used to use something called metate, which is a volcanic stone. It's a looks like a slight, you know, not quite an oval, but it's like a slanted dish. I don't know how I'm describing it. I'm describing it correctly, but it's a volcanic stone. So it's a piece of volcanic stone, and it has something called a mano, which is it's almost like a mortar and pestle, but laying down. And it's basically, they used it, put all of these ingredients, and then use this device, which is basically like a rolling pin, and then grind it manually like this with the rolling pin. I see, Evelia, your mom made mole from scratch. Oh, excellent. Oh, actually, Evelia, the jalapeno lime salt that I used is from her company called Chica y Salty. Shameless plug to Evelia, who's here today. The best rimming salts. They're hers. So I have all of my ingredients there, and all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add about 2 cups of chicken broth, and blend it until it's really nice and smooth. I'm going to add a little bit of salt here. I'm going to add a little salted more a little bit later, but I'm just going to come over here and I'll blend it. I'll be right back. Okay, so now I have it nice and smooth mixture. I'm just going to move this out of the way and move this pan over here. So I'm going to heat a little bit of oil, just about a tablespoon or 2 of oil, and then I'm going to add the mixture, our puree. Oh, you know what? I forgot to puree one thing. I have a toasted tortilla. I did this before. I toasted a corn tortilla. This is really going to help thicken the sauce. I'm going to just crumple this and put it back in here. It has a few burnt edges. That's just going to add a little bit of color. I'm going to put it back on the blender just while the oil heats up. Okay, I think I got it. So I'm going to pour this in here. And it's very orange, as you can see. It's going to darken a little bit with the chocolate. Not all moles have chocolate, just the black mole has chocolate. This isn't going to be that. It's not going to be super black. But let me flip this over so you can see what it looks like.
Maite, Allison had a question for you, why you didn't use the cast iron to heat the mole.
Oh, because there was a lot of oil in there. I could have used the cast iron, but I just didn't really, maybe I should have, because now I'm going to have to wash double. No reason other than I just didn't think. And it was a lot of oil, but I could have just poured the oil out and that would have been smarter.
I'm sorry, were we not supposed to put oil in the Dutch oven?
Yeah, you were a little bit. I just had a lot of oil because I was frying I had a lot of oil in the cast iron because I was frying the plantains, but yeah, just like 1 or 2 tablespoons.
Okay.
Thanks.
Excuse me?
You're welcome.
I was
Okay, so I'm going to show you what it looks like. And I wanted, because we're making enmoladas, I want it to be, I don't want it to be super thick. So I'm going to add a little bit more chicken broth to it. But right now I'm going to add the chocolate. So this is the Mexican chocolate. This is not going to work with like chocolate chips. Mexican chocolate is quite, different. It's mostly made for drinking. It's much denser than just your regular sort of chocolate chips. It's not sweet, but it does have some. I mean, some of it is like abuelita chocolate is very sweet, but it has a much earthier flavor. It's seasoned with cinnamon, allspice. Sometimes it has nuts. I believe this chocolate that I got in Mexico, I believe this one has almonds in it as well. So they have a much more sort of earthy, nutty flavor. So I'm just going to put this in there until the chocolate dissolves. And I'm going to add a quarter teaspoon of allspice. So this is the spice. My chocolate already has some spice to it. So this is the spice that is native to Mexico. It's called allspice because it tastes like a combination of different spices. It's going to be a little bit too thick to run my tortillas in without breaking. So I'm going to add another half cup or so of broth just to loosen it up. And I'm going to raise the heat just to have my chocolate dissolve. So it's typically 1 tablet of chocolate, which is about 40 ounces. Roughly, it could be a little bit more. I think this tablet was actually quite big, so it's probably a little bit more. But this is definitely something that you make to taste. It's a very complex dish, mole. So many different flavors, like Frida, right? So many amazing stories. So while this goes, I'm not even going to taste it yet because I'm not ready to add more salt to it. I want my chocolate to dissolve. But I'm going to set up my station for the enmoladas. And actually, I'm going to bring my cast iron pan back to cook the tortillas. I was going to use another pan, but that seems silly now that I think about it. Okay, I'm going to bring this over here. Does anybody have any questions?
Maite, there was a question in the chat and it, do you ever use, oh, sorry, I lost it. Do you ever use chocolate almendrado for mole?
Yes, I do sometimes. Yeah. I think this one that I'm using actually might be almendrado, and I think it's fine to use, there's so many different variations. I mean, I think everybody's mole is going to taste completely different because depending on the chocolate that you use, abuelita is the chocolate that's more easily, easy to find. It's quite sweet. Ibarra is another brand that's also easy to find. It's not as sweet as abuelita. Whatever you can find. So everybody's chocolate is going to taste a little bit different. And then you can taste it if you want to add more chocolate, add more spices to it. If your chocolate has almonds in it, it'll taste different as well. So I think you just make it until you get what you love, if that makes sense. Okay, so my chocolate looks like it's starting to melt. But I'm going to just remove my cutting board here. Bring a plate over. So you can see I have my pan over here with oil, my cast iron I will reuse. Thank you, Ellison, for that. So that, and then I have what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up some tortillas which I have right here, corn tortillas. I'm gonna put them over here. I'm just gonna put the tortilla in oil, just in a little bit of oil, just to soften it, not to cook it. I don't want it hard or anything like that. I just want to pass it through oil, because otherwise if I fold it, they're just gonna, without doing this, they're just gonna break in half. So I don't want that. So I'm gonna run it through the oil and then run it through the mole, put it on a plate. It's not going to look very pretty, I guarantee, but it's easy to make pretty. You just pour some more mole on top. Super easy. And then I'm going to fill them, actually, before I put the mole on top, I'm going to fill them with cheese, with queso fresco. So this is like a farmer's cheese. It's a very creamy cheese. It usually comes in a disc, and I just crumpled it. So I'm just gonna, set everything up, and then you can see it. You can see how I go. So I want to taste it first. Make sure I have enough salt. My chocolate's not quite dissolved yet. Those of you that are cooking, how's it going? Hey, Amanda, I just saw you.
My mole is not as smooth as yours. It's a lot chunkier, and it's getting to this point where it's heating up to heat up the chocolate, but it's like as hot as lava. It's like it's getting that Cajun roux lava thing going.
So I would lower the heat and maybe add a little more broth. If you don't have broth, you can even add a little bit of water. But yeah, I would maybe lower the heat.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want roux. It should be a little more silky.
While you were making the chocolate or the actual food, I was making lemonade.
Oh, how is it?
It's the best.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad to hear that. How's everybody else? Those of you that are cooking, I see some people in their kitchens. Okay, I'm gonna come back over here. So you don't want it like bubbling, too much. If it's bubbling too much, you could just a little, simmer is okay. Here, I could flip over so that you could see what mine looks like. So it's a little bit of, all of a sudden there's like a little bubble that bursts. So I still have, you've noticed my disc before. There's still a few, I have it on low, and I might want to raise my heat a little bit. It's still a little bit chunky. I'm going to add a little bit more broth. And then we're going to get ready to put these enmoladas together.
I can only imagine how good that smells.
It smells so good. It smells so good. I wish everybody was here.
I wish you weren't so far away so I could share that margarita with you as well.
Oh, me too. We have to make that happen. All right, I'm going to taste this. Oh, that's good. It needs a little bit of salt. And my plantain was not as, by tasting this, was not as sweet as I would have liked. I might add a little bit of sugar to this, and I think my chocolate may have been unsweetened chocolate, so it's a little, I feel like it lacks a little oomph. I'm gonna add a little bit of sugar to it. How are we doing on time? Yeah, I'm gonna add a little bit of sugar to it. Let me grab some sugar from this. I have some raw cane sugar in here, so I'm just gonna add like a tablespoon, just like a tablespoon of sugar, and then I'm gonna start putting these together. And it could be regular sugar. I'm using a little bit of brown sugar because that's just what the first thing that I saw when I opened up my pantry. I'm adding about a tablespoon of sugar. Those of you that are using the Ibarra, or if you're using Abuelita, you probably don't need this. Okay, so that is good. It's so interesting because I've made this before multiple times and it always tastes completely different. I think it's just the chocolate. That's better. Okay, so I'm gonna set this aside for now. Still leaving this on. And all right, can everybody see? Yeah. So I'm gonna heat up this back burner. I'm gonna add a little bit more oil to this. And then I have a dish right over here next to it, just a dish lined with paper towels, just to sop up some of the extra oil before I put it in the mole. Does anybody have any questions or any comments? Added a little bit more broth to this.
I'll just say I highly recommend this Frida's Fiestas cookbook. We'll have a copy in the LUAG reading room if anyone wants to stop by and see it, but just amazing first person stories from her, I guess, daughter-in-law, and just amazing kind of insight into these recipes and for each month of the year. It's pretty wonderful.
It is. It's such a beautiful book. I love it. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you loved it too. All right, so not quite hot enough yet. I'm just gonna wait a little bit longer since I'm on the low. I'm on the low heat. Let me set this aside a little bit. So yeah, we're coming into the holiday season, and you know, she has so many recipes for Christmas punch and Christmas salads and just, you know, everything, and every recipe has a story, and the photographs are so beautiful, and it really gives us a sense of, you know, her life. So you can sort of imagine the kind of parties that she threw, and just see another side of her that most people don't, that you don't really get from her, from looking at her paintings, you know, but just how full of, you know, life she was, which I think that the book really captures. And I think that's just what food does, right? She loved to throw a good party, and like, who doesn't love that? You know, you know, in addition to everything that she went through, she was the life of the party, which is really interesting. And just the fact, you know, the moment in Mexico where when she was living and working was a time of such, you know, turmoil, right? And this is when, you know, people, the Mexican people were given a voice for the first time in 300 years. And so she was a product of this moment. She was born during this moment, and really it was just such a part of her. So I see, you could see glimpses of that in the recipes that she chose to make, and that, you know, Marie or Guadalupe, you know, Rivera chose to include in the book. Okay, so I'm gonna run my tortillas through the oil just to get them. Oh, sorry, I thought I had this on so that you could see. Okay. So you can see it's bubbling just a little bit. So you can see that I don't know if you can tell, because I'm kind of far away. So just a little bit, I'm just gonna set it aside. I'm gonna make 3. Just to soften them. I hope I don't break them, which I might. Sort of have to be a little careful with this. Okay, so from here, put them in the paper towels, and then I'm going to put them in the mole. Whoops, I don't know what happened here. You're like, oh, there it is. I'll put them in the mole. I'm gonna dish it out. All right, so there's one. Fill it with cheese. Fold it over. And I'm going to try it with the next one. Oops, I'm done. I know that doesn't look very appetizing, but I promise you it will. Trying to get both things on the same shot. Okay. Here. So this one broke, but no one's really looking. So, whoops. You can fudge all of the breakage by pouring some extra sauce on top. So don't fret if they break. There's the second one, and then I'm just going to do one more.
And for folks at home who are cooking with chicken or the refried beans, would you put that in there now while you're stuffing it?
The chicken, you would stuff it with the chicken. I would use the beans on the side. Yeah, because otherwise it's just going to be too much mushiness, and I think that the tortillas will really break. So I would do the black beans on the side. This is typically how it is, served with rice, with black beans, and with plantains. Okay, so folding this over. Okay, so here you go. Didn't pick the right color of plate because they're hard to see. They actually look much prettier in person. So what you're going to do now is just put some of the sauce on top. And this is typically 2 or 3 per person. It's quite heavy. And then garnish them with a little more cheese. And some sesame seeds. And there's your Enmoladas. This is what she had on her wedding day. Yay! There you go. They look much better like this. So you see, it doesn't look like they broke or anything like that. Here are these Enmoladas. It's the perfect, I don't know, it's one of my favorite things to eat. I can't wait to taste it. How is everybody, those of you that are cooking, or does anybody have any? Well, first of all, I want to know, how's it going with those of you that are cooking? Ashley, how did it go with the bubbling?
Hi. So it is 8 p.m. here, and we actually eat much earlier. So I think for tomorrow,
Okay.
That's my mole.
It looks great.
And I'm going to save the queso fresco and tortillas, and I'm going to mix it up tomorrow.
Excellent.
Oh,
my lemonade, and here's my cup of lemonade.
this is
Oh, it
my
looks beautiful.
Chile water.
That lemonade looks delicious.
I make the best lemonades.
I can tell. I can't wait to hear how your mole turned out, your enmoladas turned out. What about anybody else?
Maite, you had a question from Allison. Can you talk a little bit about the regional variations in mole?
Yes, that's a good question. So Oaxaca, there's basically, their moles are all over, right? But there are two regions in Mexico that claim, mole. One of them is Puebla, which is a state in central Mexico. And, a lot of colonial, a lot of Mexican food really emerged during the colonial period. So in the 16th century post-conquest, a lot of ingredients that were coming in from the old world on these ships called the Manila galleons. They basically sailed once a year from Manila in the Philippines, which was a Spanish colony, to Mexico, bringing things like the watermelons that we saw in the painting, bananas and sesame seeds and many, many ingredients. The nuns in the convents had first dibs on everything. Everything was going to the government and to the church. So really, Mexican cuisine, as we know it today, really originated in the convents, particularly mole. The nuns from Puebla, which was basically on the road to Mexico City, they got all of they were the first ones to get all of the good stuff. So Puebla is known for its mole, black mole. Basically, the black mole is the one that has the chocolate. Mine isn't very black, even though it has chocolate, because we don't have a lot of the burnt chiles and a lot of other things that make it really black. So Puebla is known for chocolate, and also Oaxaca in southern Mexico is known for 7 different kinds of moles. So it's the black one, the red one, which is the colorado, and then there's the coloradito, which is the little red one, which is a little more spicy. And then there's a green one, there's a yellow one, there's one called manchamanteles, which is very interesting. It's in Frida's book. Manchamanteles literally means get your tablecloth dirty. And it's basically what I made today. Except for what I'm missing is manchamanteles does not have chocolate, but it has sweet potato and pineapple in it. One of the earliest recorded recipes in Mexico was written in the 1600s by a nun named Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. She was a very famous nun. She was a poet. She was a published poet in Spain, and the earliest Mexican recipes in existence date to her. They are in her handwriting. There are 36 recipes, including most of them are desserts, but including a recipe for manchamanteles, which is one of the few recipes that it's in that cookbook that I showed before. It's one of the 7 moles that Oaxaca claims, even though it's a mole that has been around since the 1600s. So it's a really interesting question, and it's a hard question to answer because literally mole means sauce, and there are so many, not just 7 or 1 in Puebla, but it is I think one of the most interesting dishes, I think, in Mexico, possibly the world, because it's so complex. It has so many layers of history to it. I hope that answers your question in a very roundabout way. Anybody else have questions? Hey, William. Thank you. I want to taste it. Or comments or anything. I know we're pretty much out of time, but we can't say goodbye without tasting this. I hope everybody's mole. Those of you that are cooking, I hope it tastes good. I love this. I need to heat up my can of beans. It's very satisfying. Very delicious.
Can I ask you something about, there was a question around regional moles. Mine more with pipián and chocolate. So my family's from Central Mexico. Is that something that you know about? Like it was more the pipián with its pumpkin seed versus chocolate. Does that have to do anything with the region that I'm from?
Yeah, I mean, definitely pipián is one, even in Oaxaca, pipián is one of the 7 moles. Really, the only mole that has chocolate is the black mole. But yeah, pipián is actually something that probably was one of the original moles that existed pre-conquest, because it's pumpkin seeds, and I've never actually made it. What else is in pipián? I'm not really, is it tomato, onion, right? So it's basically ground, pumpkin seeds. So it's using these indigenous ingredients. That you could certainly add, play with this recipe and add pumpkin seeds to it and sort of make your, make your own. But it's one of the it's one of the many variations that you see really all over. I'm not really sure if it's what state really claims it, though. Anybody else? No. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed today's class. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll share the recording, and as Elise said, please come and pick up a kit if you have not yet. The kits smell amazing, so I imagine the recipe coming together is even more amazing. So thank you, Maite, and thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Elise, for this evening's program. And it's a pleasure to be with you all. And thank you for Maite's mom for joining us this evening.
There she is, Betty.
Thank you, Maite.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Adios. Buenas noches.
Bye.
Hasta
Buenas
pronto.
noches. Bye.